I want to welcome everyone to this program. This is such an exciting program. Max Cade does have the pattern of the psychic, the healer, the medium as the awakened mind pattern. And it's the pattern to which we all are working. But also, we have among us in the Mind Mirror community quite a few people who are psychics and mediums professionally. Practicing techniques awakens awareness. And so welcome everybody, and thank you for being here today. Dr. Don Wild is a psychologist who has a particular interest, as do we, in this field, and has done some studies on mediums and psychics, or just mediums, and is himself a medium. So Don, if you want to just take the floor and say whatever it is comes to mind, I'm sure people will spring in there and ask you some questions. And
I'm a professional medium in the sense that I use it with my clinical practice. I'm a psychologist, and I use it with my clients on a regular basis. I don't know exactly what I would call it, but for me, it's a partnership with spirit, or I call it spirit, and we go into session together, and I'll be working away in my classic cognitive behavioral style, and I'll get a feeling, or I'll have a question come up inside, and I will either get a directed answer, oh, this way, or sometimes I will just get a statement. That's real mediumistic in the quality of it, because it takes over and it comes out, and I sit back and look at it and go, that's interesting. That's how I use it. I've been psychic for a long time, and I also do dowsing in a number of other fields. From the other side, I've been real interested in what mediumship is, because we don't, from the outside, we look at all these different medium and psychic phenomena, but we don't really have much understanding of what's going on. If someone here would happily correct me, I would happily hear it.
I don't think we want to correct you, Don. I think that people have different perspectives, and as this program unfolds, that we'll hear everyone's perspectives and gain a better understanding, probably expand each other's awareness of it. Mediums, as I understand it from Suzanne Temple, whose pre-recorded interview we're going to see a little bit later, she defines people who have psychic powers, mediums, as people who are wired kind of a different way, and they're able to see spirits. So I don't know, maybe you can elaborate on that. Are you seeing or hearing or aware of spirit people and stuff like that when you're in your sessions with people?
Judith, we are experiencing problems with hearing Don properly because he has low bandwidth. I may advise Don to switch off camera and see if that would improve the sound quality.
The definition I would use for medium is somewhat different from what Judith just said. I don't see spirit per se, but I have a cooperative sense of a presence with me. I suspect trance mediums, what I've seen with the mind mirror is they go into fifth state and then they drop all of the beta from about 12 hertz up. So they just go into a wait state, and then another personality comes in on top of that. What I do is a more cooperative thing in that I'm more present, and I don't necessarily take on the other personality. I work with an understanding rather than a specific personality. I can do the other mediumship where a personality comes in and I talk with them, but in the work that I do, that's not as useful as just having the connection between the two. And my guess is that is much more of what Max is pointing at with the fifth state. the trance medium is just getting completely out of the way and letting someone else take over. But that's not what I'm doing.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Where do you want me to go?
Well, I guess that you're saying that when that awareness reaches yours, that you get some insights to help you work with clients?
Not only insights, but in some cases, specific statements that I need to make to the clients. And I've had one or two occasions where it's come out and I've gone, that's interesting. And the client's response has been, you couldn't know that. So it's very specific, very right on. And I've had a few freaked clients as a result.
I bet.
I've had some sessions with what would be called a trance medium. You talk with them, they do their little ritual, their personality goes away, something talks for 40 minutes, 45 minutes, gives information. You can interact with that consciousness, for a better, lack of a better word. And then the person comes out of it and basically says, what did I say? They don't have a memory of what they've said. That's the way I think about trance mediums. At least that's my experience.
Yes, and that's why I distinguish what I do versus what a trance medium does.
Yeah.
Because I'm fully aware of what's going
on.
I've worked at a spiritualist camp for 3 summers, but I always made a distinction that I was not a medium. What I called myself was an intuitive consultant. So the person would sit down in front of me, I'd close my eyes, I'd kind of let my hands do whatever they did, and then I would pay attention to whatever showed up in my head. Pictures or words primarily. And then if a person was asking a really specific thing about themselves or someone else or their health, I would filter that through my clinical mind or my experiential mind with being a social worker and a therapist for a lot of years, so that the words that I used felt right to that person. I was always fascinated with the images that showed up in my mind, which didn't make a whole lot of sense to me at the time, like a lady that was asking me what she should do for the summer, and I got a picture of horses and that she needed to go someplace and find some horses that were interested in her. And after the session, she said she and her husband were planning to go to Wyoming next month and get some wild Mustangs. That kind of information just sort of showed up in my head. Or a Native American that came in and I started talking with him, and I got the impression of he needed to do some ritual, and he said, yeah, he did. And I said, you've got 2 of the 3 stones, where's the 3rd stone? And he said, it's with a friend, I need to go get it. And that just showed up in my mind, but I'm going into some kind of space internally that lets that information show up or come in, and then I pass it along.
So I think that would be categorized more as psychic awareness.
I would probably call it that, or intuitive awareness, intuitive psychic awareness, yes.
And you've trained it. I think most of us, especially people who've got this big amplitude alpha, have got good bit of that psychic awareness. Alpha seems, I don't know if Don would agree with this, but alpha seems to be some kind of searcher. It's not just delta. But when alpha exceeds a certain amplitude, then people seem to be picking things up and then starting to move into that evolved mind pattern, which pattern seems to be very conducive to, as Max Cade put it, a spontaneous inflow of information and insights. And then, so Don, can we turn back to you for a moment? Can you tell us anything more about your studies on mediums?
There appears to be a very distinct difference between mediumistic work and psychic work. And I was privileged to work with a medium who is very, very good at both. And while I was recording her, someone knocked on the door and I watched the psychic come in the delta flare just exploded. And then there was a slight nod of her head. The delta flare went away. And when I talked to her afterwards, she had checked what was going on at the door, and it was okay. And so it was a delta tool rather than a opening to something coming in tool that, like Garth and I have both been describing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes some sense.
These seem to be different mechanisms, and I'm curious, very curious about that.
So that was when the psychic came in with the delta, and the medium, you're just saying, seems to have a flattening of beta, or have you noticed anything else in conjunction with that, with mediums?
Remember, it starts out with a full fifth state, so it's got the huge high balanced alpha theta delta there, and initially it has the beta, but then the beta slides away and then rebuilds, and that's when the other entity comes in. Now, I don't think that that's a trance channel, and it's a voluntary letting go of who you are to allow somebody else in. I don't think either Garth or I are doing that, and I wish I've never been able to record it, because what we're doing, I suspect, would show something different. My guess would be a fifth state, but I'm not absolutely sure that that's correct. Garth, do you have any sense of what it feels like to you when you're in it?
All I call it is I do a shift inside and change my focus. I did a reading for Judith way back 2 summers ago now, and she had me hooked up, and I don't remember all the things that we went over that afterwards, and I don't remember what the observation was. It's sitting over on here to the left, back in a stack of papers I got from that week's worth of training I did out there. For me, it's just I started out doing a lot of hypnosis with people and relaxation training, deep relaxation training with people. And I had a number of episodes where I knew what a person was going to say before they said it. And then I started practicing sort of eyes open counseling, tuning into my own intuition. And then I got an invitation to go to Wani Walk with this 125-year-old spiritualist camp here in Wisconsin. And they called everybody mediums, but I think several of us really were just intuitive type people that were giving information. None of the people that I met there had a psychological counseling clinical background like I had.
Well, I could actually say a little bit about Garth's brainwaves, and Wayne's also, if he would permit me. For that matter, I could talk about Jessica's, but it's not necessary to talk about everybody's. But in Garth, what I saw was a very distinct increase in gamma. In fact, when he was just doing the brainwave profile, he had more gamma than was expected for the activities in the brainwave profile. And as we continued doing sessions for him, he was doing a practitioner training with me down in Virginia. It was very clear that he was producing more gamma than the average bear, particularly when he did that reading, because he was talking about gamma. The reading was on gamma, and he had some really interesting insights into gamma. We did a webinar and talked about his brain waves and those gamma insights that he gave through that reading. So people might want to check out that particular webinar.
You just reminded me, as you're talking about this, back in the 60s, I was doing some EEG research at UCI on psychics. And we had what they call a Faraday cage, which is completely isolated electrically. And I had a woman in there that I knew quite well, an artist, as a matter of fact. Of course, at that time, we didn't know anything about mind mirrors and, wake and mind patterns and so on. But I was using the Zener cards. I don't know if everyone's familiar with those, but they're just cards with pluses and circles and triangles on them. And I was in another room, just communicating with her, and I would pull a card out, look at it, and she would say, okay, and tell me what it is. And I put it down. As we went through this, she was phenomenally telepathic or psychic. You know, sometimes I would look at the cards, sometimes I would just put them down straight. But what I did notice that she had immense alpha. I mean, it was just, you know, off the scales, alpha, all the way through this project. And she was way beyond statistically average in psychic ability. So that just sort of, you know, reminded me that alpha appears to be an important aspect of doing this kind of psychic reading.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, really, because we're looking from Max and Anna at the whole pattern, but the foundation of that pattern is the alpha. And in every single psychic medium healer I've hooked up, just so dominant that alpha is. And at first I thought it was because we have better electronics and the Mind Mirror 6, but it's just constant. Other people don't have that kind of alpha, and it's almost as if that alpha crosses from a 5 sensory awareness into a 6th sensory awareness, and then people are really on. But it's not. These studies at the Monroe Institute have been really fascinating. Probably everybody knows that we went there and we monitored a program last June that was just on SAM, the spatial angle modulation, inclusion of gamma beats into, at that time, 12 people who were being monitored in 4 stations. But we went back in December, and this time the program was on remote viewing and out of body. This time we monitored 16 people, of which 1 was Wayne. Hi, Wayne. And I haven't sent Wayne his report yet. Just haven't had time, but I have completed it. And it's I don't know, 20, 25, 30-page report. And it looks, I had to totally drill down into the data. Some people had 39-page reports, just, I mean, a lot of graphics, but Wayne was the easiest person I've had so far, because it was just dead clear that he was having a big blast of alpha, and then boom, his gamma would turn on. And you can see in all the data, you can see the gamma turn on, and that's right when he hit the target. He was so easy, not just because the gamma surge was so visible, but because also he would say, well, I hit the target a halfway through, or 3/4 of the way through, or right after the target was called. And these studies were so great because for the remote viewing target, well, that was more of a psychic perception. But the out-of-body targets, the target was actually placed on the top of a rafter, and you had to go out of your body to perceive what the target was, and nobody knew but the one person who had been the target, and they were far away, and then they wouldn't let any of the participants report to us, the monitors, what the target was, for fear that back there in the past, the person who was doing the remote viewing of the OBE would fast forward in time, and if they got the target wrong, then they would tell us the wrong target, and that they would actually remote view the wrong target. So there are all these wonderful safeguards placed in it. And what I found so far, which has been absolutely mind-blowing, is that of the 3 people I've done, of which Wayne was one and the easiest, because he was clearly accessing alpha, high amplitude alpha, and then gamma. The other 2 people I've done the reports on, one of them is a acupuncture therapist and physical therapist, and man, 39-page report, and she did it the same way every single time. Now, Wayne hit the target 62.5% of the time, and so did she, and out of 8 exercises. So that's really high to hit a number 1 target and number 2 target again and again like that. And this acupuncture woman, she would throw out a band of delta in the left, which would incite a band of gamma in the left, and then she would go into an evolved mind on the right. And it took me the longest time to figure out what she was doing. And then the second person I did, he was just going into an awakened mind with super 40 microvolts, 50 microvolts of alpha, and he hit the target over and over again too. I happily had three of my four people that I monitored were high target hitters, and they were doing it all in different ways, and it seemed to have to relate to what they were good at. You know, Wayne listens to the SAM meditations at home, so he's building his gamma. The acupuncturist, well, she's working on her delta and the subtle energy system. The other guy was an engineer of some sort, so it was awakened mind for him. It just looks like the alpha is the pusher. And plus whatever category the person has got like their fingerprint on in terms of their past experience. Absolutely fascinating and really hard to do this data analysis, because you just want to say, well, I'm just going to look at the increase in their awakened minds and that's going to give the answer. Not the answer. Way more complicated than that.
So part of my background, Garth's here, I did 2 rounds of training at Monroe when Robert was still alive. And they have their little chambers are electronically, they block out all the electronic interference. That's my first real experience of having precognitions that I could say that came true in the near future when I got back to Wisconsin. Also, I started using his HemiSync. I used it for years and years and years with clients and with myself, and did a lot of alpha with that. And I would combine that with music or his programs. I think that was part of my base preparation for the things that have translated in that I would call psychic or psychic intuition now, that was prep for all of that.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And you know, I think there's something to be said for phase coupling inside a resonant field, which, if we may bring Jessica Coleman into this conversation right now, we had a phenomenal situation where Suzanne Temple came from Rotterdam, and she wanted to do a seminar 4, which involved her assisting people in seminars 1 and 2, because she wants to be a coach trainee. And Andrea Groh had trained her for the first 3 seminars, so I was training her for the 4th, and she was being an assistant. And she therefore brought in a medium student of hers from Denver, Colorado. We're going to upload an interview with Mary Torrey as soon as we get a chance to do that interview with her. And so Jessica lives in New Jersey, and I get this email from Jessica, and she says, "I'm coming." And I went, well, that's different, because it's usually a question of, well, let me see if it worked for me, and people will waffle and stuff, but not Jessica. "I'm coming." And so before she got here, Suzanne said, she's had some experiences. She's coming for a reason. And she got into the field of Mary and Suzanne and just immediately bloomed into these mediumship abilities, and that she really didn't know she had. And then some extraordinary things have happened since that. And she's just rocking and rolling. And if you can just pick up the story and say whatever you want, Jessica, I think it's great that you're here, and appreciate your contribution to this program.
Oh, sure. This is exciting. And yes, I definitely felt that I was supposed to be at that training at that time. And I'm a mental health counselor, so I'm a licensed professional counselor. I have a little practice here in New Jersey. And just like Don, I specialize in cognitive behavior therapy. So I'm always working with others, trying to help them to understand how their thoughts affect their feelings and emotions and yada, yada, yada. But the undertone of a lot of my work is just kind of listen to your intuition. Prior to my mirror training with you, Judith, I didn't really consider myself an intuitive person. I just felt like kind of that, just trust your gut. You know, if it feels right, it is right. And if it's not, you'll learn from it. And something just totally felt right. I just, prior to your course, started meditating. I think at the time it might have been for about a year, you know, maybe 20 minutes a day or so, nothing really intense or really advanced. But I came to a point in the meditation where I felt like I wasn't doing it right. If there is a way to not do it right, I felt like I wasn't silencing my mind. And I was getting a little bit frustrated because I am the kind of person that just likes to do and see results. And with meditation, it's not like that. You just kind of relax, and it's not that, you know, you have to do it. But at that time, I didn't realize that. So I felt, I'm doing it all wrong. I'm going to go to this Mind Mirror course and learn how to meditate, learn how to silence my mind. And I was very, very surprised through the meditations and the activities that I didn't have a lot of beta. But when we would talk about my experiences in the meditation, I'll never forget one particular meditation we talked about. A lot of dead relatives came into the meditation with messages, and Suzanne and Judith looked at each other like, you're a medium, kiddo. And it was also weird for me because I've heard voices before. I've gotten, little messages after loved ones may have passed on. And surprisingly, even as a child, I remember sharing a message with my family after my dad passed. I might have been about 16, but no one in my family said, well, you're a medium, or that's different, or that's something that most people don't hear or do. They just kind of took the message like the person was living, and oh, okay, great. And so I just, and I thought it was just kind of normal. So since I've learned that the voices I hear are spirit, and it's not just my mind, thankful to the Mind Mirror telling me that my beta's down, that really helped build confidence. It really did. And from there, I feel like I've blossomed. Anything that you can think of in terms of psychic fun stuff, like you just mentioned, the remote viewing. So I was just playing around with anything that I could. And I tried that with my daughter. I've never been to her college dorm. And I said, hey, Aria, let's play around. Does your room look like this? And I went out to describe it. And she said, yeah, are you here? And I said, no, I'm not there. But evidently, I guess my mind is. So just different things. And just kind of playing around with things and having fun, but also using it more with a healing undertone. Exactly like Don was mentioning in his practice, I definitely use it in my practice now. One example that's really interesting, I've been working with a young lady for a time, would be very fearful of her physical symptoms. Go to the ER several times a week, always complaining about weird, just physical aches and pains that would drive her so anxious. I began to think it was Munchausen syndrome, and began to think it was just all in her head. And I did get a message from Spirit that it's not all in her head, but she had like an overproduction of metals in her system, like toxic levels of metals. Her symptoms are real. And just things like that make communication with Spirit that much more profound, because I don't know if anyone will be able to tell her that you don't have Munchausen syndrome. You're not losing your mind. Your symptoms are real. It validated it for her. So, yeah, just things like that.
Tell them about the cat and the socks.
Yeah, this was the day after I learned that I was a medium from Suzanne and Judith. I went home, or I was staying at an Airbnb at the time. And in the morning, I did a meditation. I said, okay, if I'm a medium, let's silence this mind. Let's get everything together and let's see what I can get. A couple of lost loved ones did come in to my meditations, a lot of them from the day before, just to kind of elaborate on the messages they received. And I had the confidence now to talk with them and to engage them. I knew that it wasn't just my own voice, because it kind of sounds like it could be sometimes. So my uncle came in, and he was recently passed over, and he said, I really just want you to tell my wife and my daughter I miss them and I love them. I said, oh, Uncle James, I'm happy to do that. But no one in my family knows that I do this, and many of them still don't know now, or maybe they'll find out soon. But anyway, he said, well, Jessie, just tell her about the cat and the socks under the bed. I said, okay, good enough. So I shared the message with my aunt, and the message is as simple as those few words sound. It was so profound to her, and she knew it was real. And it gave her so much hope and inspiration and joy to just receive those few words from her husband. So it's beautiful. And something simple like that, that can't come from you. There's no way I could conceptualize that kind of random message. So it was just a beautiful thing.
And the story was that the cat, this particular cat, would go around the house and gather up everyone's socks.
Yes.
And put them under the bed. And so clearly this was a legitimate message, because how many cats do that, right?
Exactly. And they had a number of cats at the time, and maybe I'd say about 3, and only his cat would do that. So it was even more, profound for my aunt when she heard the message.
Yeah. And then you were telling me that you've had some significant downloads and experiences have been picking up. Not only did you remote view your daughter's dorm room, but then she says, well, remote view this and remote view this, and you just totally nailed them, having never been either place.
Yeah. So I did her job from the front door, told her the full layout of her job. She's at a little retail store. And what was really profound, she gave me a room in her college, and one of the doors was very heavy. So I remember just standing at the door and trying to open the door. I guess in my mind, the whole thing sounds interesting just saying this, but the door felt really heavy. And when I described the building to her, I said, oh yeah, and the door was really heavy. She said, Mom, that's unbelievable. It's an old building. The door is this huge, heavy door, and it's really, really hard to open. So yeah, it was just something very, very interesting.
And what's happened to you lately since you've really opened up to this?
Well, lately I've just been actually doing some healing with myself and others, just weird things that may have happened to me, little rashes or anything that kind of annoys me. I'll just go inside with spirit and see what's going on. I'll learn a lot about the spiritual aspects of it and how our spiritual bodies tie into our physical bodies, and our physical bodies is just more of a manifestation of maybe some conflicts or fears or anxieties, doubts, different things like that going on kind of in our I guess etheric field and things like that. So I've been doing some healings. I think the most profound healing for me, which I'm still very grateful for, I am, or have been, like not an allergy to dairy, but I couldn't tolerate dairy. It would actually cause me to break out with really bad acne. And surprisingly, I just kind of learned that I had this intolerance for a process of elimination. Once I figured it was dairy, I stopped eating dairy. And it's been many, many years since I've been able to have dairy. And I learned about what was causing it and asked Spirit to give me some guidance and some healing. And I got the message that it is healed immediately. And I'm like, immediately? And this was the day before Christmas. And I said, immediately, that just doesn't sound right. But I said, hey, if I'm going to trust this thing, this gift, this love, let's give it a shot. And I prepared dinner for the family, and I literally had everything, macaroni and cheese. And my family was looking at me like, oh my goodness, what are you doing? And sure enough, nothing happened. I was able to tolerate that, and I've been having dairy ever since. Yeah.
I can see this really working out to a new career for you.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking to do more healing. Absolutely.
Or an enhancement of your career, because both Don and Garth have talked about being counselors who use their abilities in their work. And how sweet is that? I mean, David Fairweather talked about that too. He was doing intense awakened mind training, self-training. And David is one of those people who is very, I don't want to say militaristic, but let's call it mechanical in his approach. And he did it with enforced symmetry on, which means you have to have complete symmetry in the left and the right brain in every single frequency band. But he went for it. And within a very short time, he was reporting that that with his clients, his patients, that he just totally downloaded their whole situations and what was really going on between the lines, and understood what to say to them. He even had to rein himself back because he was very tempted to just tell them everything instead of let them discover it for themselves. And then Austin Balcom had the same situation where he was doing enforced symmetry for the awakened mind pattern. And Austin is an insurance broker in Connecticut. We've seen him on this program before. He is totally dedicated self-trainer. And he talks about how he for the first time, after a certain point in training, he was dropping down from a training level 5 to a 4, which is very refined awakened mind pattern. At that point, from then on, he was able, for the first time ever, to anticipate some move in some judo-like, aikido-like martial art that he does, where there's no warning, there's no tell, there's no movement, there's nothing. It just happens all of a sudden. And he said he caught it right before the guy did it, and
wow,
got done, apparently. So, I mean, how cool that when you can put your intuitive powers to work in serving the world, and that's what the awakened mind is all about to begin with, is to gain those abilities, and then I guess really to help other people gain them as well, right? If we all get switched on and expand our minds, then sweet.
In my experience, when it started to happen to me, the guides, which is what I call them, told me that people would come and people were craving this ability. And I saw it immediately. Within days, I was seeing new clients coming in over and over, and they were asking for this. So, Jessica, you got a career piece here. We aren't just helping people. We are evolving people, and they see it. You should see some of the comments that I've gotten back from people about how their lives have changed because of this. So go for it.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Wonderful. I don't know if we have Tamara here or not, but I hope we do. Tamara was from Sedona when I first met her, and she is a very well-known psychic. I don't know if her abilities extend into the realm of the medium, but boy, she's got some, I don't want to say killer brainwaves, but beautiful brainwaves. And can you speak, Tamara?
Hi, Judith. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
Great.
okay. Well, I'm just enjoying listening to everybody. I started working as a professional medium. I've always considered myself more of a medium than a psychic. When I was 17, and that was a long time ago. Yes, I've been able to engage with spirits, and I've studied spiritualism in Britain. For a while, I thought I was trying trance mediumship. I've just dabbled in all things related to the Psi world for all these years. I think that if someone is a medium, then they are automatically a psychic. I think that mediumship goes to a level beyond psychism, according to the definitions that you provided.
How did it start for you, Tamara? You said at 17 you started working, but were you always switched on, or did something happen?
I think I was always switched on. I believe that some of these abilities are just brought in with the soul as a result of past life development.
That's what Edgar Casey says, that it's about, you come in wired for it because of development previously.
Perhaps some of you will relate to this. I've always been on a quest for truth. As a seeker, I am a long-term member of mystery schools and so forth. But when I was 17, I had a mentor tell me that I should start going to psychic fairs and working at psychic fairs, and that people would actually pay me for my skill set. And I liked that idea because I was trying to put myself through college. I'll never forget my very, very first client. You talk about a hard one. I had a lady, I was 17, and I went to this psychic fair, and I laugh and say that I was surrounded by moo-moo wearing, coke guzzling psychics. And this was in Long Beach, California at the time. And I was by far the youngest and by far the meekest. And I remember I wore a pastel-colored suit and sat there with a white candle on my table. And a lady was circling me. Maybe she circled me for 45 minutes. After that, she finally approached me and she said, "I'm here for a very specific reason, and I can't imagine what a 17-year-old girl, a young girl like you, could have to offer me." She says, "But nevertheless, I feel drawn to sit down with you." So she handed me her ticket, which was her prepayment, and she sat down and she said, "I want you to contact my deceased mother." This was the very first professional mediumship opportunity I'd ever had. And to contact somebody's mother is a tall order. I just think that when we have these abilities, we just do it. That's what she wanted, and whatever I said to her, I did it. You've remarked, Judith, that my brain waves tend to be characteristic for high gamma. And I find it interesting that we're talking about alpha, because I don't think in my brainwave readings that I've had characteristically high alpha. I know that I'm very gamma. I consider myself essentially a telepath. And telepathically, we can connect with all sorts of beings, and thus mediumship, or telepathically connect into other realms and do anything. So really, I think it's all about telepathy.
Some years ago, Tamara got invited to, what was it, Brazil, where you did all those readings and on and on and on. And she started getting this idea for that she should dress a certain way. She started sewing this wild costume, not tinsel, but it was like some silver or something. And she's a quiet person, but somehow she managed to sew this costume together because she was so internally impelled to do it that she went on and she came out on the stage like Elvis Presley with all this glitter and this tinsel. Yeah. In this wild costume, and there were I don't know, over 1,000, maybe 5,000 people in the audience. They just decided that she was the creme de la creme, and they went wild. And then the whole weekend was fantastic. And some of it had to do, her reception had to do with that costume.
Yes, they thought I was a rock and roll star.
I mean, how do you know which to follow and which not?
Yes, well, I think that's always the issue. So it goes back to what Jessica is talking about, and, following our intuition. I find the biggest challenge is what's my head saying versus what's my intuition saying.
So how do the rest of you deal with that?
That's a tough one. A tough question. I totally agree with Tamara. How do you discern that? Since I've been meditating, using a mind mirror, listening to spirit, following my heart, all those things, I can kind of tell the difference when I'm in my head. I don't feel like I have a whole lot of random thoughts often, otherwise normal, like calm and, not too much scatterbrained, then I tend to trust what comes in.
Are you saying you think it comes out of a stillness of mind?
Yes.
Would it be the same for you, Garth?
After doing it for a couple of years, I started having repeat images or repeat phrases that showed up in my mind. And that sort of kind of confused me. And then I decided to go ahead and say whatever was there, even I knew I had said it to somebody else. I went ahead and said it to that person that was in front of me there. But there was a time where I was kind of second guessing because there was familiarity with what I was saying, or even the image was exactly the same and it was a new person. Eventually I just said what was there to the person that was in front of me.
How about you, Don? How do you, is it more of a feeling for you because you're feeling the presence of the incoming energy?
A couple of different things, and I've certainly had that uncertainty, but it's become less. There's a sense of the energy makes itself known, and at that point there's a sense of certainty that comes with it, and I cannot put that one into any more words than I just know. But it's a totally different quality of knowing. This is not an intellectual I know. It's a yes. When I sense that yes, I go with it. And the other piece in here is that I've become much more trusting that spirit isn't going to lead me astray. It may create a few interesting situations. It doesn't lead me astray. It's not, spirit isn't out there to mess us up. And so trusting that it is okay in some way is another important piece. But then this sense of certainty comes in that just says yes. Wow, Jessica, I understand totally because it was years.
I wonder if we could bring Donna in at this point, because I know that Donna Bach has some significant healing abilities that come through her family and is a naturopath or naturopath, however you call it, but also that you have a wild and crazy delta. And I wonder if intuitions come at the same time for you when you're healing people, or how that works for you.
Hi, it's nice to get to hear all of your experiences, and I've been feeling very pleased that we have this forum that we can all connect together from far away. My family comes from a long line of 5 generations that we know of hands-on healers, and along the women's lineage. And my sisters and I, there are 5 of us, we all have that gift of being able to lay hands on people, and just from the time we were 4 years old, being able to know where someone had a problem, walk up to them, put hands on them. They'd look at us little children and say, wow, how did you know I was hurting right there? And then we'd just shrug and put our hands on and then walk away, and they go, wow, that feels much better now. So, of course, becoming a naturopathic doctor was just sort of a choice, because I knew I was in a healing field, and it was a family tradition to do so. And then I just went ahead. I have more than 40 years of experience now, seeing one patient after another. And my MO is that I'm a kinesthetic intuitive. So everything, when the person walks in the office or even before they arrive, I'm feeling what they're feeling in my own body. And I realize, oh, that's not me. I'm not the one that's feeling that. That's the person I'm going to see next. And as soon as they walk in, I can feel that that's what they're there for. So I'll put my hands right where the person has the problem, and they'll look at me funny. Wow, how did you know that was that, even if I didn't know them? So then what Anna was able to verify was that the place that that intuition was coming from, when I started taking the training with her 16 years ago with Gary and I down at Esalen Institute, was that it was big delta, sometimes out to more than 100, way out there. And then the alpha, I have a very low alpha, like a 9. The signature pattern that I walk around with is sort of in a trance. I don't necessarily go through life with much beta land going on. And it remains to be seen how gamma plays into that. I haven't had that many hookups to see where the gamma lies in that picture. But what I do know is that it's very large delta. It's kinesthetically felt intuitively. My messages come mostly to me kinesthetically. I don't get auditory or visual that much. Once in a while I will, but mainly it's the feeling, and then my hands get really hot, and then they heat up, and then the person feels better. And they'll say at the end, and I don't talk much. I don't just fill the air with telling them what the messages are from the other side or anything like that. I don't talk that much, and the person gets a lot of downloads of their own without me having to say much. And then they'll go, wow, that was the best session I ever had with you. And they've been coming to me for 30 years or something. But the basic thing is that if you don't have to get into beta and do much talking, the download of the energy for the healing purposes seems to be much stronger by not talking too much.
Mm-hmm. You know, and I wonder if Gary can say something about amplitude and any role that he thinks amplitude might play insofar as healing or picking up information.
Well, all we've seen, you know, we've been able to hook up, and I think I've mentioned this before, healer and healee. Donna's sister actually was one of them. And we saw that when her sister came into a room to heal someone, that she went into an awakened mind pattern and was immediately able to say, you know, this is where I feel the issue to be. And when she would heal, actually put her hands on someone, her delta would go out to 500 microvolts. I mean, it was right off the scale. I mean, we could measure it beyond 500. It was the old Mind Mirror 3. And also the person being healed would also see a huge flare in delta.
We had
at
two
the
mind
same
mirrors.
time.
We had them both
We had
hooked up at once.
both people hooked up at the same time. We've seen these larger amplitudes, and I'm thinking, just going back to the person with the Zener cards, she was an artist and very, very psychic, very intuitive. And artists tend to have fairly large alpha to begin with. And so it's just making me curious. I've never really checked that, for artistic ability, or what sort of creativity do you have along with, your psychic abilities. I think everybody's been pretty much right on the money here, particularly when you are talking about larger amplitudes. Clinically, large amplitudes like that are not always considered to be healthy in some of the clinical research.
Yeah, my sister has been told that with that much delta, they were wondering whether she was an epileptic, which she's not.
Have to look at things and ask people what's going on, and if they have any history of clinical issues that might bear on that. But if they say they're psychic, you just shrug your shoulders and say, hey, good. That's good for you. We just finished a workshop in Hawaii with Dawson Church with EFT, and the whole thrust of his workshop was connecting with your inner guides. And so it was using EFT and meditation together to help people for our week-long workshop to get in tune with their inner guides, not to read for other people, but just to know what their guidance was. So I'm a little bit away from the speaker here. And so we took before and after EEGs on these people, but it's, we didn't take any readings during their training. So it's not, let's say, super well controlled, but we haven't had a chance to go back and look at everything yet. We're going to start kind of pulling things apart here very shortly.
The ones that we did see the before and after, though, the total of the percentage of the time they were in awakened mind and higher delta and higher gamma, the numbers on the percentages at the end of it was a 5-day difference between the initial measurements of their ballistus reading, 3 minutes eyes open, 3 minutes eyes closed, and then 5 days later the same exact thing after having spent the whole 5 days doing all these meditations and things like swimming with dolphins and all the fun things we did in the spiritual way out on the ancient Hawaiian heiaus. So we were able to connect up in ceremony in various ways, and to see the difference in the couple of people we pulled up there before and after, there was a higher percentage of the time that those desirable patterns were a higher number. So we're expecting to see, there were 12 people who got hooked up before and after. So this will be an interesting database to go with.
We saw at the very end, on the end of the 5 days, that a number of people had jumped on the summary page from 5 to 4 in a lot of their readings, particularly with their eyes closed. When they would close their eyes, they would immediately jump from 5 to 4. And so we don't have the numbers worked out yet, but hopefully in the near future we will.
And that was basically just changing their default mode, since we weren't actually having them do anything special when they had their eyes open or their eyes closed.
Fantastic.
I have a few things to say, if possible.
Oh, please. I thought about that because you got some big gamma and you are super psychic too. Please.
Yes, because I never come up with subjects that I'm not interested in myself. So, as I mentioned during our previous program, probably just with the baby being born, I finally recognized, I can read information easily. It just comes to me. And then rolling backwards, I realized that, I've always considered myself being very down to earth, very practical person, and I never thought of me having any, special, this magical abilities, because I always thought of, the psych readers being like magicians almost, That's how you have this as a child. You think of them, they're magicians. They can see things others cannot see, or they can do things others cannot do. And then now, looking backwards, I want to mention a few things because Suzanne as well, her interview inspired me, or I resonated with lots of parts of it. I've always thought this is normal, that I can tell something about other people. I mentioned before to Jessica that being at the university, I suddenly started telling some information about, other people, and she just said, Oksana, but how do you know about this person's character? You don't know that person that well. And I said, I just don't know. I just know. Isn't it obvious? I think everyone can see it. And I never really paid attention to that, at that moment. But later on, I noticed that, yes, I always needed quiet time. Working most of my life in the office, and when you have to wake up really early, I liked late night hours because that's the time when everyone goes to bed and it just quietens down, and I can finally tune to myself and listen to myself, hear where I am. Because during the daytime, I'm just dragged, and it's just too much for me. It's overwhelming to me. And then I always asked myself questions like, why do I feel this anxiety? What this is all about? I wanted to make sure I feel good, and was always trying to fine tune to myself. And I thought, oh, this anxiety is actually me receiving some noise. It's just surrounding noise. My antenna receiving too much of, other people's stuff. I need myself. And as I said, these night hours were best ways for me to reconnect with myself and feel good. So I had lots of problems with parents saying, you have to go early to bed, you have to wake up early tomorrow. But it was essentially important. I can't explain. It was critical for me to have this time for myself. Nobody else can understand that. And then now I realize that certain hours in the morning, around just before the sun's around 5 o'clock in the morning, usually, I sometimes wake up and I start downloading information. It just happens. I'm doing nothing. It just comes to me, and I keep, being surprised how or why other people are so, I call it energetically illiterate. And I call it to myself, I'll just look at the energy level and see what's going on there. And I can see, okay, that's the problems that I'm having, and that's because of this and that. And I call it just looking at the energy level. And I know that my mind state, how it feels like when I go there. So probably being just after, sleep, I have very good alpha. I'm not just overloaded with lots of beta thinking or planning. I mean, the day hasn't started yet, so my mind is very open to receive anything. And throughout my life, I had, asked myself a few times questions like, if I ever going to have a happy family, if I ever going to have children. And I had a download, still being, married with my first husband. I had a download. I saw a different person who really loves children. I saw, two happy boys that, my future husband was playing with in the yard, and I was thinking, oh, that's weird. I just received some download. Okay, but it felt like, oh, that's what it is. That's the answer. And differentiating how to discern whether it's my mind or not, I can say it comes as knowing. You don't question it. You don't think much about it. It just comes to you as a statement. And throughout my life, I had when I met my first boyfriend, I wasn't even introduced, I think, to him, because it was just, I entered the university and it was my first meeting with, my group mates, and I saw a boy talking to a friend of mine, and I thought, oh, he will be mine? And I thought, oh, isn't it it's not very, I don't know, I'm not shy enough. What's going on? It's just, how do I know? It's just a statement. It was a statement. And we didn't really, come together until a year later, but I don't know, it just happened naturally. And lots of little things like that. And I remember once I saw my teacher, and she said that she could speak Spanish and French, and I had this very fast thought, oh, I want to speak to study French too. And again, it was maybe 7th form at school, and I haven't started learning French until I got to the university. But I had this quick message coming through my head, out of nowhere. So as I mentioned before, it's like a falling star. The intuition messages, they come really fast, they come unexpectedly, and it's important to kind of be silent enough and attentive enough to grab the tail of that message and kind of wait, what was it? What is it all about? And another interesting aspect I want to cover, that I had a friend who just stopped when I was hitchhiking, and then he turned out to be a psych reader. I mean, his main occupation is different. He makes documentaries, but at the same time he has abilities to read. So later he came up to the gallery where I was working to do a reading for me, and I mean, I never thought I was psychic, but he told me, Oksana, maybe you should do one for me too. And I was like, me? For you? I can't do it. And I never even tried doing any reading for him. But what I can tell, that being in his company, whatever we were doing, just walking on the beach, going, to the dinner together, in his space, just being in his company, I always received messages for myself, just none related to what we were talking about. And he had the same experience. So what I'm trying to say here, it just probably being in each other's field, we amplify our abilities, and kind of he helped me to open up and get more insights for myself. And he was receiving some just great ideas for his business. I mean, I had no influence and understanding about documentaries business, but somehow I was amplifying his field and making him more open to receive these messages. And I find the same with my baby, which is strange, but the best downloads I had with sleeping with him 5 a.m. in the morning, he is asleep and I'm getting all these messages. So yes, it's very exciting, and I think it can be trained, and the best moments are when we are relaxed and when the mind is quiet, and it comes as knowing. And the more you meditate, the more you just learn to stay quiet and attentive, the more you will be able to receive these messages. And of course, the people around you are very important. That's why having a community of such people is important, because you'll be like Jessica, showing up in the right company. You'll just be blossoming and blooming instantly. It's just like, shoo. It will open you up. This is a group effect. This is a group effect, and this is also good and important.
Thank you for that, Oksana. I know that you're switched on all the time, having spent some time around you. But I think that we're all switched on. There was an Edgar Cayce metaphor of us being radios and receivers and operating on different channels. And what he basically said was that meditation is what stabilizes the radio so that it can receive more channels. It increases the bandwidth. And I think that we're going to find, after your studies, Gary and Donna, after the ones at TMI, the ones we're doing on the various psychics, mediums, and healers that come our way, I suspect that we're going to ultimately find that everybody's just operating on their own bandwidth, and that it really does have to do with amplitude. But Donna, for you, it's big delta. I've seen the big delta for at least 3 people here, if not 4. It's big gamma, and whatever it is, I think that what really plays a big part in it is not only intention and desire. We certainly saw that at the Monroe Institute. Those with the highest intention and to hit those targets, they were the ones who hit them. But that's just a outer manifestation of what really turns out to be love, a connection with that field that's based on caring. And this is kind of pivotal in the interview with Suzanne Temple. Oksana, you want to cue it up and watch this? It's really interesting because she talks about her development and a spontaneous illumination, and she does a little bit of discriminating about the differences between psychics and mediums, but it's a real heart-centered interview, and I think you'll really enjoy it. You guys want to watch it now? Yes? Okay. Oksana's pulling it up for us. And while she's doing that, just thank you all for your contributions. We're so lucky, aren't we? Somebody was here today for a practitioner trainee, brought her in to hook her up and practice the hookup. And this was a woman who works in the corporate field and really didn't, she knew she had some abilities, but it wasn't until she saw her brainwaves that she went, oh, oh, it's real. And we have this mind mirror that says, hey, you probably got these abilities, or no wonder you have these abilities. And there are a lot of people walking around out there who are questioning their sanity, much less their abilities. So I think we're all very fortunate, don't you? So Suzanne, it's so great to see you. And
Yes.
I just want to see if you can start out our interview by telling us something about how you developed your psychic or mediumistic abilities, and maybe a few stories related to that.
Since I think I was a child, I was psychic, but I thought everybody had the same thing as I had. So I always could feel people's emotions and whether there was something wrong with them physically. And I always would know things before they happened. So this precognition. When I was a teenager, the dreams started, the precognitive dreams. So as far as I can remember, I've always been very, very psychic. I thought everybody was. I didn't know that I was different in that aspect until many, many years later. I don't have, extraordinary stories because, like I said, they're so normal to me that everything, even the extraordinary stories at that moment were normal. But there was this occasion when I was, I think, about 12 or 13 years old. We had a dog at the time. We always had dogs in the house, but I was walking with that dog in the fields. And I will never, ever forget this. Certainly, I started shifting towards another state of consciousness. And of course, at that time, I had no clue what happened. And all of a sudden, I felt this great sense of oneness. And I have no clue how long that lasted, but I felt that in those moments everything in the universe made so much sense. It was like a lot of knowledge was downloaded, so to speak. In that moment I knew everything, and yet I had no clue what I knew. And this sounds very strange, but when I came out of it, I started to think about what I actually had learned, and most of it I couldn't even remember. And the experience was so profound that I started to cry, and I came home and I told my mother, and I was angry with the world at the same time, because I knew that we were all connected. I knew that this whole universe was one big organism, and we were all part of what I call nowadays God. And I was so angry with humanity for not understanding that, and destroying the world, and engage in wars. And I didn't understand that at all at that moment anymore. And that passed too. Anger also went away. But that was, for me, the most profound and extraordinary thing that happened. Although it is mediumistic, it's nothing to do with the spirit world. It's more to do with shifting consciousness and, realizing that there's more to this life than just a physical.
Did that kind of rewire you in any way? Did you find that there was a change in your intuitive awareness after that?
Not at first. And if it did, it happened so gradually that I wasn't aware of it. But looking back, I now understand that it must have, because that's when the predictive dream started, etc. Yeah. At that time, everything that happened to me was like a normal thing. My mother is very psychic as well, very intuitive. My father has healing abilities. And so I grew up in a family where all of that was quite normal.
Mm-hmm. And you live and now and lived in the Netherlands, and if I remember correctly, your parents were teachers, and they were unusually accepting of your abilities.
Yes.
Which I expect opens the channel somewhat, because you don't have to hide and deny or doubt your ability.
That didn't mean to say that they completely understood me, because they have abilities too, but not to the extent that I have them. So even within my psychic family, I was quite a bit, out of the ordinary, not the norm.
Yes.
My mother used to say to my father, that one is not holding any normal job. She's either going to be an artist or anything creative, because she's not the norm. Yeah.
Yes. So what happened in your first mediumistic encounter?
Well, I can't say that I remember my first one, but I do remember my first one that I was aware of the fact that it was spirit, because I know that on a lot of occasion prior to that, I had contact with spirit. I just didn't know. I went to this school for psychics. And that in itself is a quite extraordinary story, because I had no idea I was a medium, that people like me were called that. And I held an ordinary job. I was a manager in an international company. And at that point, I was single, and I thought, I'm going to book a holiday. And I was browsing through a magazine. And all of a sudden, I saw a picture of a building. And while still browsing, not reading the article, a thought came up in my head, and this is where I'm going. And then 5 pages later, I thought, that's a strange thought. So I went back and to look at the building, and I thought, yeah, I'm going there, but I still no clue, what the building was. And then I started to read the article, and it was an international school for people developing their intuitive side. And within 5 minutes, I had booked a course, had no clue what the course was about. And when I paid the course, I thought, what did I just do? What did I book? And then I thought, okay, I'm not, going to think about this. I'm just going to pack my bag. And I'm going to bring my walking shoes, because if I don't like the course, I'm going to walk in the environment, because it was in England and, beautiful countryside. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to be bothered by it, because with the course came lodgings and food. So I thought, okay, just like, booking a hotel. And if I don't like the course, I'm going to walk outside for the whole day and come back in the evening. No worries. So I arrived in England, and as soon as I stepped inside the building, I had this incredible sense of being home. And again, I thought, this is strange, because I'd never been there. So this was in the afternoon, and the next day the course started, and I never forget it. It was the first day. Nobody in the room knew each other. I didn't know the teacher, and she didn't ask anything. She just said, okay. She pointed at me. She says, do you want to come in front of the class? And I was, like, okay, not a problem. So I stepped in front of the class, and she says, okay, now make a contact. And I thought, okay, I'm going to, shake hands with people sitting there and, introduce myself. And I had no clue what she was talking about. So I just went up to somebody and, was introducing myself, and okay, my name is Suzanne. And the teacher, started laughing a bit, and she called me back, and she said, what are you doing? And I said, well, you asked me to make a contact. And she said, no, this is not what I mean. You have to make a contact with somebody in the spirit world. And I looked at her and I thought, in the spirit world. What's that? And she says, well, somebody who passed away. And I looked at her like I was, okay, this is so not for me. I'm going to, excuse myself, go to the bathroom, put on my walking shoes and walk out of here. And she said, okay, you obviously, this is your first time here. And I said, yes. And she says, and obviously you don't know what you're doing here. And I said, that's right. This is an intuitive course. And she said, no, it's not. And I said, so what's this? Where am I? And she says, well, this is a mediumship course, and you're a medium, and you can make spirit contact. And she says, would you like to try? And I said, yeah, well, why not? Well, as long as I'm here. I mean, I was already embarrassed in front of everybody, so I thought, okay, let's give it a go. And she says, just make up a story. And I started to talk about the lady, and that I knew that she, loved bars, and when she was in bars, she would used to dance on the tables. And I described how she looked, and I said, okay, and my hands are getting really, really cold. There's really something wrong with my hands, and I said, okay, my heart starts to palp now, so I think she has a heart condition. And I just started to make up a story. And sure enough, there was somebody, which was actually the teacher herself, who could recognize everything I said. And I had her sister in the spirit world, which I described perfectly, everything that was wrong with her physically, because she had metal in her hands because of an accident, and she died of a heart attack, and she did love to go to bars, and she was very notorious for dancing on the tables, and everything I said. And I was just expecting to make up a story, because that's what she said, just make up a story. And everything I said she could recognize, and she says, yes, this is my sister, and she's standing on the right side. And so I sat down, and that's a lot to take in. And this was my first spirit contact, basically. Yeah.
That was really clever of her to say make up a story, because then you just listen to whatever story pops into your mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course, obviously she was used to, newbies like me who had absolutely no clue. And I was very fortunate. The teachers I have encountered was so skillful and so talented, and yet so modest. Yeah.
So really it was a natural ability for you that was connected to your early intuitive gifts, and possibly enhanced by that mystical experience in the field when you were young. And so how did it progress then? Did you just start doing readings for other people, or did you go to courses? How did you expand on it?
I have never worked, still don't, as a professional medium. So the first 4 years, I just started going back to England 2 times a year. So 2 weeks in a year, I started doing courses there. After that, I started doing courses in other places in the world. So I started to expand and, experiment a little. This is basically what I did. So week courses and stuff like that.
And gradually came to trust your abilities.
That's it. Yes, because I believe that abilities cannot be developed. It's the medium that develops, and the abilities are already there. It's like, when you have a rose in a bud, when it unfolds, and this is how we call a mediumistic unfoldment. We call it unfoldment. It's still a rose, whether it's in a bud or whether it has blossomed. There's nothing added to it and nothing enhanced when it becomes a full grown rose. Everything is already there. It just needs to unfold, and the unfoldment is basically the medium developing themselves and not the abilities. Yeah.
So do you give readings to people, or do you only teach?
I don't give readings, no. I don't have a private practice as a medium. I do demonstrations, though. I teach, and within those teaching environments, which is usually spiritual centers. Now, they can be small, they can be large, they can be, wherever in the world. But usually within those centers, they have demonstration nights. So for people who have never encountered mediumship or want to enlist for mediumistic training or psychic development, they have evenings with tutors demonstrating. So then you go up to a podium, and you make contact either with a double link with a spirit artist or by yourself, and in that way people can see your abilities and also have proof that there's more to this life than just the physical. Yeah.
What does it mean to people when you do a demonstration or someone else does a reading for them? What does it add to their lives?
I can't say what it's adding to people's lives because that's so personal. But for me, mediumship is all about healing. So if you have made a contact and no healing has taken place either on this side of life with the recipient or in the other world, because somebody comes back and say, okay, I know I could have been a better mom or a father, or I know that I did something wrong and I really want to apologize and please forgive me. So if there hasn't healing taking place on either sides, you haven't done your job as a medium. So for me, mediumship, besides proving to people that life is eternal, to me it's all about healing.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So for me, normally, and this is maybe also the reason why some spirits want to work with me, is I get a lot of people who have unfinished business. Last Sunday, I did a demonstration with one of the centers, and my first contact, sure enough, was a mother in the spirit world. Confessed to her daughter that she hurted the people she loved most in life. Now, either both, because I could feel, you can feel, spirit emotions. Both were getting very emotional, and I talked a little bit about her mother and about the characteristics and what had happened, obviously because it's in public, you don't go into details, personal details, that is. But she could recognize her mother in so many other aspects I'd given her about moving and physical things, and at the end of the contact she said, I have forgiven my mother, I forgive her. And that to me is the most, rewarding thing about demonstrating or making a contact. It's almost like it is to me a sacred thing. So I don't make contacts just for the fun of it, or I don't walk into the street and walk up to people and say, hey, whatever. I don't do that, but that's a personal thing.
That's beautiful. Yes, I imagine for some people, there is tremendous healing in just their realization that there is another side and that the person
Absolutely.
is still alive and cares and very possibly happier or in less pain than they were when they were on the planet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So what does meditation, brainwave expansion, and the idea of a spiritual life have to do with the abilities to be a medium? How do those things relate, or do they?
Well, this is not an easy question. Yes and no. And this is, I think I need to explain this a little bit, because I need to start with making the difference between psychic and mediumistic. Now, here in Europe, we, and I believe in America that's a little bit different, but here in Europe, we distinguish between psychics and mediums, because everybody is psychic in whatever degree. because that's within the makeup of our human physicality. We are able to get information from energy, from everything that's living, because everything that's living has an aura and has an energy field around it. So being psychic means that you're able to tap into that energy and get information from it. Now, every medium is psychic because it's a precondition for mediumship. But not every psychic is a medium. Now, coming back to your question, what has meditation and, getting another state of consciousness to do with mediumship or your psychic abilities? I believe that with developing your consciousness, growing towards a higher state of consciousness, your psychic abilities will enhance. I'm not sure, though, that your mediumistic abilities will enhance, because they're either there or they're not there. So you're developing the precondition to be a better medium by developing your psychic awareness. But with mediumship, I believe that there has to be already an ability there. Then the question is why isn't everybody a medium?
Yes.
Yeah. I think this has to do with the variety of life. Not everybody is a man, not everybody is a woman, not everybody has the same characteristics or physical abilities. And that's the same thing with mental ability, so to speak.
So maybe it's that mediums are just tuned that way. There's some wiring or some special composition within the body, mind, and spirit that just flips a switch and then you're on.
Yeah, I believe that that's true. I know that especially for physical mediums that's true.
Say a little bit about physical mediums. Well, I mean, they're about manifestation of an energy that moves into physical form, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
They, through their physical makeup, the spirit world is able to manifest through them. So it's not them being able to manifest something. It's the spirit world manifesting through them because of their makeup. Yeah.
And that's pretty rare, isn't it, to be a physical medium?
Yes, extremely.
Have you met people who can do that?
Yes. Yeah. I'm currently investigating some of the most world famous physical mediums, and I'm very, very fortunate that they granted me their cooperation because in the past a lot of physical mediums have been hurt by investigations, people who had no clue what they were doing, and I mean literally hurt until death followed. So usually physical mediums don't cooperate in public, for one, and two, if they do not allow anybody to investigate them. Yeah.
And you'll investigate them with the mind mirror?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
That's going to be fascinating, and we really look forward to that research that you're doing. I don't know that there is going to be a specific brainwave pattern, like you can train it and then boom, you flip that switch. And in fact, I think that you've done something like 75 sessions on mediums so far, and are finding, in fact, that there is no, seemingly so far, may not be a specific brainwave pattern, but that indeed their brainwaves are different from each other and from most other people. So in terms of research, I'm really excited that you're doing this. It's very frontier work.
Yes, I'm not looking for a specific pattern as such, because like you said, I don't believe, but I dare anybody to prove me wrong, because that would be, a milestone. But I don't believe that there's a general pattern for mediums. But by investigating states of consciousness with mediums, there is so much more you can tell about the way they work, or how spirit works through them, that's so interesting than just finding a general pattern. I might, but the goal is not to find a general pattern for physical mediums.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and some concepts that might not be familiar to a lot of people. And I wonder, before we let you go, is there anything you'd like to add? Anything that you'd like to mention to people that might be of help to them regarding intuitive and or mediumistic abilities and their ability to develop them?
Not so much about mediumistic abilities, again, because I believe they're either there or they're not there, but some people might be mediums without realizing it, like I was, although they might know that they're psychic. But I believe that if you meditate regularly, or as I used to say, or still do, go to your altered state of consciousness, because that might not be a meditative pattern. Just go to your altered state of consciousness and spend some time every day in that state. That might develop something as you are developing. Now, depending on your starting point, you might get more psychic, or you might realize that some of the information you're receiving might not be from, your higher self or psychic energy, might be from spirit. But the ultimate goal, of course, is not being more psychic or developing mediumship. The ultimate goal, of course, is realizing yourself. The ultimate goal, I believe, is realizing that you're God, in essence. And I believe that if you make that your goal, then everything that should be there or you're born with will develop by itself.
Beautiful. Thank you for your time, for your insights, and for your loving spirit.
Well, thank you, Judith, for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the interviews.
Does anybody want to comment on that? Tamara, we could say something, would you?
Yeah, I know exactly what university she's referring to, because I found myself there in 2003. It's very much like Hogwarts. If you can imagine a huge brick college with many passageways and mysterious chambers, the third floor is entirely dedicated to physical phenomena. So they have bugles, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with the idea of floating bugles, or with plasma demonstrations or wardrobes. Yeah, so at that college, there's a focus on all levels of mediumship, including physical mediumship, which I'm glad this is in Britain, and I'm very glad that the British Society for Spiritualism is continuing some of those older techniques. I know that we have our spiritualist camps in the United States, and I know that a couple of our members or participants are active with them. But I have to say that my experiences in Britain at that university were really quite phenomenal and surpassed anything I've experienced in the U.S.
They've been around longer.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, actually, spiritualism was born in the United States. But the British just kind of adapted it and took it on.
Aren't we glad they did? And isn't it interesting that Max Cade was the secretary of the British Society for Psychical Research? I mean, this is one of the things I love most about Max Cade, is because he was such a full spectrum human being. This hardcore scientist on one end, and this someone who was, well, a mystic on the other end, a scientist and a mystic. And I think that's why this work has such scope and spectrum, don't you?
Absolutely.
Anybody else, any comments on Suzanne's interview or what Tamara just said or anything else about this program? I feel all warm and fuzzy, and I hope you do too.
I loved it, and I wanted to say that I've had that experience of whenever I'm in the, like Oksana said, whenever I have been in the presence of others, or even in the case of this college that Tamara is talking about, a place that's embedded with the frequencies of that phenomena of abilities, then that's when those gifts come out more easily that I didn't even know I had, to be able to channel someone's dead relative or their dead cat or something that I never even thought I had that gift. But when I'm around other people who are doing it, then it comes out. I think that even the bricks and stones in a university like that can hold on to the entrainment value that helps raise other people's awareness to whatever's feeling more psychic than they normally would notice. Like even your baby, Oksana.
You know, Wayne, I wonder if there's anything you want to add to this conversation. After all, I have talked about your brainwaves. Maybe you want to respond to that in some way.
Oh, I really don't. I was interested in this little seminar, this webinar, and I thank you so much for inviting me. I've enjoyed it very much, and we'll be in touch later. So thank you very much for this, Judith.
Thank you. And Jessica, thank you so much for sharing your story. I think Donna hit it with the whole idea of the resonant field, right? You totally amped up here with Suzanne and Mary.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
Garth, anything you want to add?
Nope. Appreciate the opportunity to listen to everybody and add some of my experience to it.
And we hope to hear many more. And from everybody, this doesn't have to be a one-time program. I mean, we could keep it going. Be awake. We're going to be more intuitive, that's for sure.
Judith, one thing I would like to add that Suzanne inspired me or like reminded me of, whenever you are reading, whenever the truth is coming through you from the spirit or however you put it, everything makes sense. And it's absolutely true. So when you start losing sense, when you feel that you are disconnected, so I mean, it means you are disconnected from the spirit world. Whenever you are there, everything makes sense. And that's where you feel love, that's where you feel grace, that's where everything is, that's where you feel you are God, in Suzanne's words. So that's how you can discern and differentiate that you are there, and this is not your mind playing tricks with you.
Perfect, Oksana, as usually you've...
Judith, just one question. I don't know if you've looked at the ability of the new mind mirror to show two brains coming together as one. We have that ability in there with, as two brains begin to sync and become correlated, it turns both gold.
That's right.
And I'm wondering if we have people who are in an awakened mind or telepathic or psychic in some way, if we can see if there are two of them together are, merging and getting information from each other, or, intuiting what's going on. We'd be interested to see, I haven't looked at that ability or capability of the mind mirror, but it might be something that someone would like to play with. I probably will somewhere down the road, but right at the moment, not.
I think it'd be great.
Yeah, because we can't.
Resonance.
Yeah, because we can't.
We put it in.
We can't hook up 4 people at a time. I don't know. We can only look at 2, but if we had 2 and 2, maybe. I don't know what the capabilities are of our mind mirror here to do something. But I know the Heart Math has just developed a system, which you probably saw at the Transtech, where they can measure like a dozen people at a time to see if their hearts are all getting into resonance together. And also they have that at Burning Man as well. It would be lovely if we could do this with the mind mirror as well.
Yeah, it would. The thing I love most about the mind mirror is that we really do see people getting into, as Oksana pointed out and Suzanne brought up, getting into contact with that field. I mean, that's what all these higher state patterns are, isn't it? And how beautiful that Max and Anna and so many people who came before us, especially Max, in inventing the mind mirror, invented such a phenomenal instrument that you can see the interaction of your consciousness with that greater than. Wow, that's amazing. Talk about field coupling. Yeah, so let's just keep enhancing all those things, as you say, Gary, that allow that interaction to happen on the level of the human brain, but more than the human brain, and becoming more evolved than the human all along. So thank you for being here, everybody, one and all, for your attention, your insights, and your loving care.